So I'm really delighted to be joined by Dr. Stephanie Franz. And Stephanie, you are an ex-GP who is now an EFT and Matrix Reimprinting practitioner. So welcome, Stephanie, and hi.
Hello, Sharon. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And before we get too much into your story on transformation with Matrix Reimprinting, could we just start off with a little explanation or into your background as a GP doctor, and then we'll go into why you're no longer a GP doctor.
Absolutely. So I started, I actually started off in biology. So I studied biology for 3 years and did an intermediate biology degree, so I have really good founding in sciences. While I was studying biology, I realized that actually my interest, which surprised me a bit, lay more in the human side of things, and I got a fantastic a job in the term break in the hospital, and it was actually working in intensive care and looking after very, very ill people. They trained medical students and biology students up to be care assistants, and that was absolutely life-changing for me. It was I would say that was at the time the pinnacle of medical care, really. Absolutely, I was amazed, and then was able to change over into medicine. Had medical school was amazing. I went to Berlin, and I just loved all the learning. But I was very lucky very early on to have teachers that actually challenged the traditional view of things. So one of my orthopedic teachers in the very first class we had with her, she said, well, we know that pain and X-ray findings don't correlate. So people might have a certain level of pain, but we can't match the pain to the X-rays. And so it's not like, if you have a terrible X-ray, you're going to be in terrible pain. If you have no changes, you have no pain, because you have people with really bad X-rays, no pain at all, and other people who have horrendous pain and you can't really find anything. And it's only when you have people with a lot of pain and the X-ray match, then you go, oh, it's because you have, really bad changes in your back. That's why you've got so much pain. But it was just really brilliant to have teachers like that, because it just stopped me from getting a really closed mindset. As a medical student, I was also really, really privileged to do a research year. So I stopped the medical studies and you went into research, proper lab-based research. And one of the doctors who was my supervisor, she was actually trained in acupuncture. And I got quite stressed working in the lab, and I got headaches and I got a lot of colds. And she did acupuncture on me, and it was so effective. I'd always felt quite positive about it, because so when she offered it, I was really, really keen to have it. So that then meant I had to train in acupuncture. So as a medical student, I was saving up my money, and the people organizing it, they were very happy for me to pay in installments. They were so sweet. So I was actually a fully trained acupuncturist before I even was a doctor. But what it did, it showed me that there are different ways of looking at the body. So the Western way of looking at the body is one way, and it's very valid, but so is the Chinese model of looking at the body. And it's whereas the Western it's analytical. So you cut up the body, you look at what you have, and then you look at how is that going to work? Okay, the heart is pump. But the Chinese, they didn't dissect bodies. They looked at how do they work, and so I'm really interested that that the Chinese, with acupuncture, you could treat depression. And I thought, wow, you can treat depression by putting needles in the body. It's from a school medicine point of view, it didn't make any sense. But in the Chinese model, they link emotions to different organs, and and we actually reflect that in our own language as well. We say, you know, I feel sick in the stomach, or my heart is broken, or I've got all this fear in my gut. And so it makes a lot of sense. So I was just always interested in that and kept a really open mind. I was also very lucky. I was actually able to treat some patients when I was later on a junior doctor, and had some really, really great results. So I was really keen on acupuncture. I then married my husband. He was from Bristol, so I moved to Britain, started my GP training. But then life changes, you know, once you're no longer a student when you're then a proper doctor, and then you have family. You know, it's just the pressure sort of just gradually builds up. But I was always had such a drive. I really loved my work, and I have to say I had to really work on the grief of not being a doctor anymore. But I'm in a good place now. But I think it's good to mention that, because it wasn't like it was an easy decision to give up general practice. So anyway, the pressure built up, and I started getting back pain, and it was just classic. It was just it came more often. It would last longer. I needed more and more help, until I was at a point where I was absolutely crippled. And I'd gone down the whole medical route. I was seeing a specialist, a pain clinic specialist, who gave me back injections. It was absolutely horrendously painful, but I was so convinced that was going to fix it. I mean, this should have just fixed it, just from the placebo effect. From what he had explained to me about these injections, I thought, oh my God, that's it. This is it. I'm going to be healed from this back pain. And they did trial runs with trial injections, and I was completely pain-free. And I was moving, I was doing everything. And I thought, wow, this is going to be it. Of course, you can guess what happened. I had the injections, and it didn't work. And then I had some more injections, because I thought, this has got to work. But it didn't. And I sort of just, okay, this has not worked. The next thing was more medication, surgery, you know, and I just realized, you know, I was already talking to a psychologist from the pain clinic. I just realized, where's this going to end? You know, this route should have stopped a long time ago. This was not working for me. And so what then happens, I had an amazing colleague, my lovely colleague Lynn, Dr. Lynn Thompson in Bristol, and she said to me, Steph, do you think you might be stressed? and I said, what are you talking about? You know, I love my work, I love my life, you know, I love what I'm doing. I am not stressed. I've got a massive disc prolapse. What are you talking about? So she was very brave, and she just said, listen, you know, just think about it. Here's a book, and it's a book by an American doctor called Dr. John Sarno, who has for decades been working with this. And he has been working, what I mentioned earlier, there is no correlation between changes in your back and the pain that you experience. A lot of the changes that are seen on X-ray, they're just normal. It's just what happens as we age. That is not the reason why you're in pain. And when I went for those back injections, the specialist he was an anesthetist. He actually showed me how the nerves work in chronic pain. So normally there's always a balance. So you can feel a pain, but there will always be lots of mechanisms that will reduce the pain that you can feel. But in chronic pain, all those mechanisms are wiped out. The nerves they change in a way to make you feel pain more. And he was just saying, well, that's just nature, you know. And I just thought, hang on a minute, why would the body be doing that? You know, it can't just be random, you know. It's not just one nerve going rogue. It's on every level. It's where the pain is felt, where the nerve transmits the pain. It's in the brain. It's on every level that this pain is being switched to be felt. And I just, it was just, I started reading this book, and the penny dropped and my eyes were open, and I just thought, oh my God, it's true. And that then started me on the real journey. The next step was I met Dr. Linda Thomas, and she's well known to the community. She must have been one of the very first people to train in EFT Matrix. Now, I mentioned that acupuncture, that I had such a high belief in it, and actually the WHO recommend acupuncture for chronic pain. I had acupuncture treatment. It was so painful, I could not tolerate it. So I was obviously very disappointed. Yeah, I'm a trained acupuncturist and I cannot tolerate the needles. So I was really, really very low. So I went into my first session with Linda. I had no idea. I deliberately did not look up what it was, how it worked. And so I went in there. I was obviously completely blown away by it. And that really just set me completely on the path to healing. Now, when I stopped working in general practice, I was not taking medication anymore, but I had been taking huge amounts of medication. I had been offered more medication. I was using props everywhere. I had a little stool in the shower. I had special mattress. I had cushions everywhere. In the car, on my seats, I had a TENS machine. I had a special travel mattress. I had, everything. I was thinking of getting a stick, one of these, they're quite groovy, sticks just for stairs. And I now run 5K. I don't need any of this. And I am absolutely convinced that the vast majority of chronic pain is due to internal stress, internal programming, which we can with EFT Matrix, we can find out why, we can find out what to do about it, and really change the outcomes.
Steph, we were talking before a little bit about the actual stresses of being a GP. Could we talk about that? Because there's so much in the news at the moment that we want our doctors to work longer hours, and we want them open at 7 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, and
absolutely, we
should be there, nice long half an hour sessions with our doctor so we can completely share how we're feeling. So what is that like, being on the doctor's side?
Doctors have a very long and very unhappy tradition of self-exploitation. So and it's all about being tough and strong, and but most doctors, they when as a junior doctor, when you start being put on really horrendous rotas where you have to work all weekend, hardly get any sleep, all these things, you just think that's normal. You just think, okay, well, these guys did it, well, I'll better do it, because I want to help my patients. I want to be a good doctor, and I'm strong. I'm going to be strong for my patients, and I think as a sort of society and individuals, what we very often do is when there's something we can't quite achieve, we just put more pressure on ourselves. Okay, come on, do it, you can do it, and that's great, and so we put on more pressure, and then we get better results, and a bit more pressure, a bit more results. And there is a time where with increased pressure you will get more results, but then there comes a time when it plateaus, and then you go, oh, I need to put on more pressure, but the plateau doesn't change. You will not get more out of yourself. And what then happens is, you put on more pressure, and then you get, upset, why aren't things getting better? And then suddenly you crash. And so what's I feel happened to the health service is, let's say 20 years ago, you were able to make savings, you were able to get more out of the service by getting doctors to work longer, to do more in their appointment time, but that we're not there anymore, because patients' needs are becoming more and more complex. And it's not about prescribing a pill. Prescribing a pill is the easiest thing in the world, but it's in the vast majority of cases, not the right thing. So the pressures on the health service, I think managers or the politicians in charge, they're just not realizing. They just don't seem to believe it. They're in complete denial. You know, doctors are not moaners. They're not quitters. You know, they want to help patients, and they do that a lot of the time at their own expense and at the expense of their families. But there comes a point where people just say, I can't do it anymore.
Okay. And from a trauma point of view, Steph?
Well, that's a very good question. I do believe that an awful lot of doctors are actually completely dissociated, and from that, I think it's a valid mechanism in certain circumstances. You just need to function. But if you're permanently dissociated, it's soul destroying. It is soul destroying. So. I mean, my husband's still working, and a lot of people who are still working, and my heart goes out to them, because we do need doctors to work. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it anymore. The very, very tragic side of this is that there are an awful lot of doctors that are committing suicide. In the States, it's a lot worse than here, and it's not physician suicide. There's an actual term for it, and yeah.
Steph, I know you were talking about having a bad back, but what actually, you know, what was that breaking point? What actually led you to leaving being a GP and, you know, coming to the dark side of holistic therapy?
I wouldn't have left general practice had it not been for my back being so painful that I had no choice. So I have to be honest, I had no choice, I had to go. But when I look back, I can see the pressures that were building up on me. I didn't at the time, because at the time I was just, I'm you know, everyone's coping. I'm going to have to cope for the sake of patients. I'm going to do my very best. And but what it creeps up on you, you don't realize it. It's not like from one day to the next, you know, things have changed. It just gradually, you know, turning the screw down. But GPs used to be able to manage their time by, you would see a complex patient which would need more time, and then you would have easier consultations. But those easy consultations have been taken over by nurses. So nurses see the straightforward cases. A lot is done over the telephone now. So all the easy, light cases have already been sorted out. So every single patient is complex. And it's not that doctors don't know what to do with them. It's just, it's very draining. You haven't got the time. You're taking shortcuts, and also you're just not you're not able to connect to your patients. And it's actually, I think the connection is so important for healing. And I mean, as a doctor, you get so experienced, you know, patients don't need to tell you very much about what's been going on for them. You know exactly what you need to do with them. But patients want to tell their story, and they have a right to tell their story. But so often I had to say, this is what we're going to do, and patient is then upset. And although what I was, you know, the treatment I was giving on the paper was absolutely correct, you know, left brain, right thing, but from a context point of view, it was really, really upsetting for patients and for me. But I just, okay, everyone is doing this, we've got to do this. But there came a point where I realized, well, I am taking shortcuts. And I'm sort of that I make the decisions based on my experience, but I am not perfect. I am human. There will come a point where I'm going to take a shortcut, which is not going to have a good outcome for a patient. And I realized I would be so. I don't know if I, you know, it sounds dramatic, but I don't know if I could survive that. Knowing that I took a shortcut, knowing I should have done something, but decided not to, and it was, yeah, again, soul destroying. And I had a few patient encounters where I just felt so unsafe. I felt unsafe afterwards. They were fine, but I wasn't doing what I would have done if I'd had the resources and the time. And then I knew with the litigation culture being cranked up, that there would be questions asked, well, why did this happen? And it would be just my responsibility. There wouldn't be any questions asked about, well, she didn't have the time. Well, so what? Neither have all the other GPs, so I just realized I would be the one standing in front of the judge on my own when I was being forced to work in a way which was not the way I chose to work. And so
there's that constant underlying fear, just running in the background, like a little computer program, just running. Because I know from when I used to go to the doctors years ago that you've got that 10 minutes and you've only got 10 minutes to speak, and you may only be going in for something small, but you're probably not going to get back in to see this person for another month or so. So
it's awful. And I knew what the patient felt, and I said I know, and I'm sorry, but and the thing is, so now previously patients, if they could easily see a doctor, they wouldn't need to have their 10 minutes. They say, okay, I'll come back if there's anything, but now they feel once they're in, I need to get my, my deal, because so it's very, very, very sad. But I think it can still be turned around. But so anyway, for me, I realized I wouldn't be able to work in that way anymore. And I'm now able to really connect with clients and really get to the root of what's wrong. And I feel I can really help them. And I'm also really keen on integrated care. So it's not about one is better than the other. I think they work beautifully together, the medical system and the holistic system alongside and complementing each other.
Yeah. And you were talking earlier about being a bridge. That bridge between both worlds, because you've experienced both worlds now.
I am absolutely convinced that it's in the interest of the medical system that we have more holistic therapies, because in general practice there are estimates that about 90% of patients turning up, it's psychosocial, psychosomatic issues, and that is much better treated holistically. That is the correct treatment, and that's the way people heal naturally. They're empowered. They heal not just themselves but their families and their communities. If I give her a pill, that's not going to help anyone, and it's going to cost, and she might get side effects, and it's so I think that's the correct way to do. But then there are conditions which you want to have treated in a hospital by
of course. Yeah, if I get run over by a car and break my leg, and the first place I'm going to want to be is hospital.
And then once that's healed, you want to see the holistic therapist to deal with the trauma.
The trauma.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because it seems that nowadays, the in word is to talk about mental health. I mean, Steph, we've been doing EFT Matrix for a long time now, and we completely understand the need to talk about mental health as well as physical health. So could you talk a little bit about mental health and the traumas that you experienced maybe going into the past that led to your pain in your back?
Yes. So I just had no idea. And I think EFT Matrix has really helped me understand where the stress came from and how it played out in my life, the decisions I made, the programs I was running, and how they were actually really, really helpful for a long period of time until I feel the environment changed and I had to change my programs. So I was really puzzling, because I was always saying my life has been great. My childhood was great. Yes, it wasn't all rosy, but that's not normal. You have ups and downs, you have your, family issues and that. But when I compared myself to my friends, I just thought, well, I was the one who did well in school. I was the one who went to university. I had a great job. I'm married. I've got a kid. I've traveled. I've had a fantastic life. I lived in Berlin. You know, it was my dreams that were come true. And so I couldn't understand where would this stress come from? And when I began looking at my own stress levels, I think the big difference to my peers at home, and probably one of the factors that drove me to success. So it worked as it was a strategy that really worked for me. Was I was half English, growing up in a small German village, so that was a bit exotic. And also my family wasn't from that village, so most people had lived in that area for generations. They were from that area, and they spoke a certain way. Everyone knew everyone, and we were in some ways outsiders. We weren't rejected. We were welcomed, but it was always clear that, you know, everyone knew everyone, but they didn't know us. And there was always this. Okay. So I had this underlying sense that I don't belong. And the other thing I think that is really important is obviously the whole of Europe had to recover from the war trauma, and there was a huge hype, you know, a lot of, you know, great stuff that happened after the war, but I think it really hit home with the sort of second and third generations. And I am convinced that my grandmother, my grandfather, my German grandfather, he had been a refugee twice. My grandmother once, and my father had been a refugee once. So they were displaced people. They'd been refugees. They'd been traumatized by war. I think the difference to the other people, they were also traumatized, but they weren't refugees because they were able to stay in their area. And then there was my mother being different. And so I think that was a huge stress factor when I think a lot of children, they just want to fit in. But school, I loved learning. So it was just a place where I felt really safe. And I think I was quite a quiet child, you know, so teachers really liked me. So I think me going ultimately into med school was just one long extension of my safe spot in school. You know, I just loved it. It was just great.
So through having sessions, you discovered that there was all this ancestral trauma.
There was, exactly. And just a quick shout out to my amazing swap partners. So I worked a lot with Renara Barkley on ancestral trauma, and that's been really eye-opening. And it brings so much compassion to yourself and to your family when you realize actually what your family's been through. I think my grandmother, if I were able to talk to her now, I think she would also say, well, I was lucky, wasn't I? I was lucky. And, you know, I had everything, and you know, all the sort of material comfort, and the house she always wanted, and her fur coat, and, you know, all these things. But she was deeply unhappy and she had huge health problems. And yeah, so I think that family trauma, when you're growing up with people who don't realize that a lot of their mental health is governed by unhealed trauma, and we didn't understand, you know, what was going on, but there was a lot of unhappiness, a lot of illness, and I think as kids you just get on with it, and you just make your decisions, you just try harder, work harder, and so I think if there had been a better recognition that back pain is not a physical condition, it is the root of my back pain, in most cases will be internal stress created by trauma. And so with chronic pain, the stresses are often perfectionism. So people decide, I'm going to be absolutely perfect, because if I'm perfect, nothing bad can happen to me. So I'm going to behave perfectly. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be nice. And that's a really high internal stress, always being nice, because you're actually neglecting yourself at the time. So that's one. The other one is people pleasing, perfectionism, and this constant drive, this never being able to really relax because you're never really safe. And so I'm looking back, and I can see the very first time I had back pain, if I'd had the physical treatment, which helped, but if I'd been able to accept at that time that we need to look somewhere else, because yes, the pain, we can treat it physically, but you need to change some of your programming, otherwise it will come back. And that's exactly what happened. But for me, that, you know, the knowledge wasn't there in the medical system. All the people that treated me, they treated me to the best of their knowledge. I had amazing treatment. And I still see a chiropractor just to have checkups and checkovers, because I don't want to self-neglect, and so just to keep me going. And yes, so I think when we're able to see mild symptoms, not as, oh, just that one thing and it went, but if we can really take notice of very early symptoms, then people don't necessarily need to go down that route that I went.
Where your body's really shouting at you to get your attention.
Your body is really shouting at you and really flooring you, because you cannot go into that environment anymore and work like that. So that's one thing I'm hoping to do. I'm still seeing a lot of clients who are at the point where I am, but I'm hoping that if we can all just continue to get the word out there, and it is now becoming more and more recognized that back pain, it's stress. It's not because you bent over. The bending over was what showed it up. There was something wrong, but it's not the bending over that caused it. It's your inner programs that are running. And that's why EFT Matrix is so amazing at this, is because it can help you find out what the stress is. It can help you fix it, and it can help you grow. So it's not just about fixing what's broken, it can help you move beyond that and be better. And so although it was very, very tough at the time, when I had to stop working as a GP, in some ways I'm so grateful for the learning from it. That,
of course,
yeah, that I'm at peace with it. But I don't think everyone needs to go down that route.
So, Steph, you work with clients now. So if somebody was listening to this and going, you know, that's the person that I really want to work with, how would they contact you?
Through my website, I would suggest. So my website is www.trueumatrix.co.uk, because I feel with the EFT Matrix work we can really discover who we really are, and not who we are when we're run by our programs. And so when we take away these layers, and it's always beautiful. When people really see why they decided certain things, it's always from a place of love. They don't decide to take on these programs because they're mean, as they think. It's not. So I think that's what I see with my clients. And I work a lot with people who've got really complex issues, so I'm very happy to work with people like that. I work with a lot of very high functioning people, a bit like me, so seemingly everything's fine, seemingly I have no reason to have any problems, but when we look at the programs, then it all makes sense. And the beauty is, you're not going to lose your ability to function well, but you're just going to actually be functioning a lot better, because you're not on that plateau about to drop, because you're then moving back into that space where you're able to grow. And so it's really lovely work. And you get people. It's not like psychotherapy where you need to do it for years. It's a few sessions, and you're a lot better then.
Yeah, and after each session, you're growing and growing and growing. So
absolutely. So it's not a fixed thing. So it's all very flexible, and you learn to trust yourself, and you learn to listen to your own body, so that it doesn't need to shout at you anymore.
Beautiful. Yeah. And Steph, if you could just take a few minutes, if there was one or two things that you would like to say to Carl Dawson, the creator of Matrix Reimprinting, what would you say?
Carl, thank you so much for all that you've done, for what you've created, for who you are. And I just would say, stay true to yourself. Continue to know yourself, to trust yourself more, and keep moving forward. No resting on your laurels. And yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stephanie, or Dr. Steph, as we call you, Dr. Steph, for sharing this so much information. We could talk for hours, and I think we should do this again and talk more about trauma and PTSD, and I would love to talk more with you about that. But for now, thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you too.
So I'm really delighted to be joined by Dr. Stephanie Franz. And Stephanie, you are an ex-GP who is now an EFT and Matrix Reimprinting practitioner. So welcome, Stephanie, and hi.